You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. Could the path to wholeness involve healing both where you've been and where you're going? Find out more in today's episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore the profound possibilities of healing both our past and future by accessing our multidimensional true nature. Through spiritual alignment and transformative energy, we uncover how wounds and conditioning can be dissolved to reveal our innate wholeness. This conversation invites us to consider how connecting with our enlightened self can accelerate the awakening process and foster deep spiritual growth. Kristin Kirk is an international healer, spiritual teacher, and writer who has been gifted extraordinary vision and healing capacities from her 2003 awakening. She accesses our enlightened self and multidimensional true nature to dissolve our wounds, karma, and conditioning into light and reveal our innate wholeness. Her transformative energy and powerful transmissions accelerate the awakening process and deep spiritual growth for many. Engaging with individuals and groups, Kristin supports rapid and radical spiritual alignment and transformation in the inner and outer reality. She shares her gifts all over the world to dissolve distortion into harmony and to accelerate healing, embodied awakening, and self-realization. Online or in person, she offers transformational healing and teaching in her monthly live-streamed healing transmissions through the Soul Classroom, as well as in private sessions, retreats, workshops, and speaking engagements. Kristin's gift of articulating the ineffable allows her to bring you with her as she describes the details of your soul, our inner collective landscape, and beyond into our atomic, galactic, and infinite true nature. Based in Hawaii and Massachusetts, she loves exploring and living in the exquisite oneness that nature so readily offers and enjoys the miraculousness of life. Let's meet Kristin Kirk. Hi, Kristin. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because healing the past and future now is such an interesting and intriguing topic for our conversation today. Actually, I can't wait to dive in and find out more. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's just a total delight, and I'm excited about the conversation as well.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here today. And from such a beautiful place, coming in from Hawaii. So definitely bringing all those energies with you as well. And I'm very, very excited to get started. So would you like to share a little bit about yourself and your story with our listeners so they can get to know you a little bit and maybe let them know what you do today in terms of helping people so they can get an idea of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thank you so much. I had a shiatsu massage practice that I loved, and I was seeing clients every day in my own office and working with people in healing physical, emotional, psychological patterns, and working with the Chinese medicine modality, reading pulses, doing structural analysis. And I loved my work. And I had this inner knowing that I was supposed to be doing a different kind of healing work. And it was in the search for that work that different events happened that catalyzed my awakening. So the things that started to shift in my practice was I started seeing pictures coming out of people's bodies where there were points of pain. And those pictures would appear in full technicolor and have all the details of the emotions, the thoughts, the storyline, what happened, who it happened with, when it happened. And I ended up pretty much freaking people out in my office because of the level of detail. And as those pictures kept coming, I could trust the process because I was getting validation from everybody of the details. So I began to really understand the subtleties and the nuances on the inside of what was reliable information, what had the absolute resounding ring of truth, because it was also being validated afterwards from people when I would share. So the process began that way. And then maybe it was 7 months into that process, I started seeing a little gold thread appearing behind the first image. And then another image would open up with the same quality of details of different time period, different characters, but the same souls. And what the dynamic was in a different lifetime that was a precursor to what the challenge was in the current life. And I was also shown, I didn't know I was being shown at that point. It just appeared. So in the beginning unfolding, the images would appear, and then the knowledge on how to heal it would then also appear. So I went through a inner process of trusting the unknown and learning how to prepare my mind and my heart and my body to be able to receive these images and the information out of infinite nothingness, because I couldn't see where any of it was coming from. So it was like the beginning preparation for awakening and trusting that inner truth, trusting the emptiness, trusting stillness, and really learning to discern the resonance of truth so that I could keep moving forward, because people couldn't validate the past lives I was seeing. Mostly, some people, a few people, right, could validate that. But in general, it was all the preparation of this lifetime experience that taught me that deep discernment. So the healing work just continued to expand from there. My vision opened up more. I started seeing the guides I was working with. I started going through deeper levels of awakening within myself to both go through my own healing process, but also shift my levels of awareness and embodiment to function from higher states of our consciousness so that I could see and function from there and offer healing from there. So when I opened to the soul level and started seeing everyone's past lives, I then started having access to all of my past lives and was going through a healing process for myself with all of the past trauma that hadn't had the conditions there to support the healing and resolution of the experiences that happened. So, I mean, I could talk about this for hours, and I'll just add one more little nugget to that, in that it expanded both my awareness, and the healing expanded to shifting from seeing one lifetime in a soul to seeing patterns in the soul and multiple lifetimes where the same theme was being addressed in all these different lives. So I started seeing the soul more like a mandala and working with it on that level, and then opening up and seeing the collective and seeing the relationship of our karma in through the collective and working through the collective fields and opening to larger levels of God consciousness and creating our souls and creating worlds to incarnate into, and being present with the awakening process and self-realization through all those layers, as well as understanding how to heal at that depth. And so when, in the same way with a tree, you can work with the twigs and the leaves, and if you work with the branches, you address all those twigs and leaves. And then if you work with the limbs, you address all the branches and the leaves. And if you work with the trunk, then you're addressing all of that. So the healing work is similar in that the depth that I'm accessing is getting closer and closer to that trunk, working from that aspect of consciousness. So I don't know. I could keep going. Do you want me to keep going, or would you like me to pause so you can jump in and ask a question? Or
no, thank you so much for sharing that, and I can tell how passionate you are about that, and definitely, I just want to say this makes a lot of sense when we look at a lot of the things that are happening today in the world, where we see these increases of chronic conditions, chronic pain, stress, illnesses, because we are not generally healing at that level of depth. We are looking at the leaves, right, instead of the trunk. And so what you're saying, even though some listeners might think about past lives and wow, how does that all figure in? But if we look at patterns of our own struggles and challenges and illnesses, right, if we don't go back to where those patterns originated, it makes sense that we have a lot of trouble actually addressing any of those and finding that deep healing. So for me, this brings everything together that we're experiencing in today's world, and why we're experiencing so much pain and suffering and illnesses at this point is because so many of us have forgotten, like you said, this knowledge that we used to have for this deeper kind of healing. So thank you for sharing that and putting that in a little bit of perspective also for our listeners on how many levels deep we can actually go into our own healing. And just by what you've said now, I would imagine that this also changed your life at so many different levels once you started healing and becoming awake to all of these different energies and the consciousness. So how did that change things for yourself in your life when you actually started healing from the trunk instead of the branches?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been extraordinary. And it really began through my clients first, because I had to reach a certain level of consciousness in myself to start making those reality shifts. And in my office, in those beginning months, years, I've lost track, what was so astounding to me was that I would see the pain and the trauma and experience it. I would recognize that it wasn't mine, that it was theirs, but I would experience it with the intimacy as if it was mine. So I fully felt the experience that people had had. And so I would know the depth of it and the intensity of it. And it would always, always, always resolve and turn into light and love and truth and healing. And so the beginning shifting of that for me was resting in awe that all the pains that we had actually could resolve. And when they did, they turned into an aspect of extraordinary life, extraordinary purity, extraordinary love, and the wholeness that we all seek was actually what was true underneath the surface. And so what that did for me in that time period was it brought forward an incredible curiosity and a thirst. Yeah, this desire to understand. So I would move closer to pain as opposed to our instinctual response of moving away from pain. Like if it's fire in the stove, our instinct says, pull your hand away, right? So we do that. But emotionally, it works the other way, that it's actually leaning into it with love and embrace and compassion that brings in the healing. And so one of those strong forces for me was that curiosity, because if everything was turning into light and love, I wanted to find out what that was and how that was going to happen. So that seems just much more accessible to share from the start of how it happened for me, because now things are extraordinary of communicating with the trees and the sun in the morning and the turtles in the ocean and the birds that come and sing next to me on the porch. And so from where it started and where it is now, there's such a dramatic difference. But those beginning steps are so kind of crucial and powerful because it shifted my relationship to suffering. It shifted my relationship to drama and to stories, because I was seeing the unfolding of people's stories and then seeing, well, what happened beforehand? Why did that person relate this way? And I'd see the inner mechanisms of consciousness and how we function. So that first turnaround of awe and curiosity and trust. That's the other thing that really came forward, was trust, because I was seeing over and over and over again how all of these things were resolving into a purity and awakened state. So that's the beginning. That's the beginning part of that shifting.
Wow. And how can we imagine this? So for our listeners who are maybe experiencing their own challenges or their own pains or emotions that they're working with, how can we access this deep healing or turning some of these challenges into this light that you're speaking of? Where do we start with that when we're coming from a point of being in this actually very dense world, this 3D world that we live in, and we are used to, taking a medication or basically numbing ourselves to a lot of the things that are coming our way? Where do we start with these first few steps of accessing this magnificent energy that you're talking about that can help us in our healing and our moving forward? Where do we start with that?
Well, the first thing I'd like to acknowledge is the value of numbing, right? Before I start going into the layers, all those past lives that I needed to go through and tend to were present because I didn't have the capacity. It wasn't that I didn't have the capacity. Maybe that was true on some level, but really it was that the life circumstance hadn't been set up in such a way that I knew that I had access. So the first step is knowing that you have access, even if you don't know what that access is right now. And that your life is created, all of our lives are created for healing and not for suffering. And so trusting that there is a pathway for you and that it is available, and it's available now, is extraordinarily important and the first step. And numbing is another flavor of experience that is sometimes useful for navigating a current situation. When you get a tooth pulled, you get the area numbed because that's how it will work best. So there's no judgment about numbing or avoiding or any of those possibilities that we have access to in the plethora of our emotional choices. And if we don't know that life is set up for healing, if we don't know that, it's going to be hard to access it in a more conscious way, to then amplify that truth in our own experience for us to then keep opening up in through that truth on the inside to support the journey unfolding in that positive way. So that's the first piece for me. One of the things that I was also aware of in the whole process of healing for people is about taking responsibility.
Yes.
And when we've had such trauma in our lives, it's really easy to look at what the other person is responsible for. And one of the simple, small exercise, or not exercise, is one of the simple examples in my own life that I wanted to just mention was in one of my relationships. I had always been frustrated with the fact that my partner would break the things that were precious to me and would leave things around the house and leave a mess. And so I was constantly being upset by things around the house and that my things being broken. And so I decided to play with this experiment of looking at myself, of what was I actually doing to help create this reality. And I ended up tracing it back to my childhood and seeing how living with my father, that my things were not taken care of. My things were broken. And that I had internalized that in order to take care of myself, I needed the external things to get taken care of. And so it translated to then blaming my partner, because ultimately I felt like I wasn't being cared for when he left something out on the counter. And the inner stress that I had around things being broken was in my field. And he had his own stories of not being cared for. And so the stress of that unconsciously in my field triggered his stress. So he'd be more nervous around things that I cared about, and he'd break them by accident. So when I saw that pattern in myself and tended to my own inner reality, it shifted my field. And I stopped being irritated by the things that he left around, and he stopped breaking things. So it's just a thought that came forward around supporting our inner process and that curiosity.
Yeah.
To not be looking at the outside of what the outside looks like, but to come to the inside with curiosity and to continue that unfolding of both our emotions and our thoughts and our storylines, unfolding them like wrapping paper to find the gift on the inside.
That is so beautifully said. And thank you for sharing that. What an insight. And that, I think, comes a lot from, like you said, your own experience and then your own work that you're doing. So thank you so much for sharing that. This will be, I think, really valuable for listeners. And one of the pieces that is often difficult to do is to actually take that look at ourselves, to kind of hold up that mirror and see what's going on and trace that back and actually understand what these patterns are that are running underneath all of that. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, the first piece is accessing that depth of love and trust that we were speaking about, because once you know that's the truth, then it's easier to look at the other things and you can be curious about them, because they're all ultimately going to turn back into light.
Yeah, and then we're back to the beautiful light and energy that you were mentioning in the beginning. And it does actually, really now start to sink in that it is all set up for our healing. It is all set up for us coming to this energy and to this awakening. And there are different paths that each of us will take, but ultimately through all of these experiences, that's where we're heading, and that's what we're meant for. So yeah, that was my light bulb moment for the episode. So thank you for that. But yeah, beautifully said. And thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. One thing that I am wondering about is, you brought up trust, right? And you've brought up trust a few times now in this conversation. And I think this can be a really hard thing for people, is the trust in themselves, but also in that we are set up for healing. That can be a very, very difficult thing to trust when you are in pain, or you're struggling, or you're having some very, very negative or traumatic experiences. So is there a way that we can actually start building that trust, and that we can increase capacity for what you are talking about? So when we are in a place where we're not ready for that yet, and we are numbing because we don't have that capacity yet, is there a way for us to build that? Is there a way for us to build that trust, to start stepping into that?
So it will most likely be different for everybody. in what it is that brings them access to that. And it may be that it's easier for some to access trust, easier for others to access love, or others compassion, or truth, or beauty. Like all of these are attributes of the totality that we are. And whatever your entry point is the one to lean on. So it may be that walking out in the woods or late at night or first thing in the morning gives one access to that infinite spaciousness and the stillness to help you find that stillness on the inside. It could be that you love listening to music, or you go for a jog, or you meditate, or you sew. I mean, like, people have all different ways of accessing that inner ground. So I would encourage your listeners to take inventory in their life of where is that moment in your life where you feel that peace. And it can be as simple as being in a room and catching the sun through the window. When people's lives are so different, like you could be in a room that you can't leave because of health conditions or whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter if you can't get outside, right? It can be a window. It can be a plant in your room. It can be a memory. And that you can use the memory of that moment in time as your access point. So that would be my first recommendation, is finding your access point. And if you don't know of one, to sit and get quiet and kind of drop into your heart in stillness and simply ask. Ask without looking for the answer. To just ask in that emptiness, and that same emptiness in which those pictures started appearing out of people's bodies for me, right? It's the same emptiness that everything arises out of. And so to sit and rest with that stillness and emptiness and ask, what would that be for me? And that as you begin to focus on that and keep accessing that, it builds. On the inside, you build your access to that inner truth. And maybe something else becomes stronger before trust does. But that when you access love or access purity or access whatever that aspect of the infinite truth is that we all are, you have access, and everything else is actually in there. For me, one of my points of contact was curiosity. So that was then what would allow me to open and trust into the experience, knowing that this feeling has to have God at the bottom of it, or goddess, or source, or Gaia, or whatever makes sense, to you. And it was because of my experience that I could trust it, because just over and over and over again. And you can borrow trust. You can borrow my trust, right? Like all those experiences that I'm sharing, like it always happened. Always. Never once did it ever fail. Never. So that would be my thought for sharing an initial step.
Yeah, beautifully said. And yes, we can lean on your trust to take those first steps, and curiosity. I think curiosity is a beautiful thing. And very often we have so much information coming at us nowadays from the internet and from social media, and we tend to miss our own curiosity and intuition and where that leads us, because we're so overwhelmed and buried by all this. So that's a good place to come back to and start from again. And, I was just thinking back to actually one thing that you said to me when we first came on for this interview. You said that you were so grateful And that really struck a chord in me, because I do think also being grateful is one of these places where we can actually open up to that trust. I feel like when we're in gratitude, there almost isn't much room for anything else other than being in the moment and being grateful. So I'm almost feeling like gratitude could be another one of those access points as well, if we have something that we're grateful for, and every little thing, like you said, seeing a sunbeam coming in, or for me it was always hearing my cat purr. I was so grateful just for that sound, and yeah, I feel like those are those special access points where we can open up to some of that energy and some of that trust. So thank you for sharing that. It's a beautiful, beautiful feeling. And I almost want to say that even if we are experiencing a lot of challenging and tough and traumatic things, that there will be still those little points where we can find that access and also our healing. So yeah, thank you for reminding us of that. And thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much for bringing up the gratitude part, because that is totally true. And it's so embedded in my life that I didn't even think to name that one. And it's true, in our opening discussion, I can't tell you how many times I use the word grateful. And it's profound, like being grateful. I mean, yeah, for things we just don't even think about. I mean, I'm so grateful when I eat that I have food. And I'm being honest, I'm literally profoundly grateful. I've pulled together a beautiful salad, and I am so grateful for those beets that came out of the ground and hung out in the sun to like make themselves. And I'm grateful for the people that all cut the lettuce so that I can have a bowl of lettuce. I mean, I'm being honest in that truth of that gratitude. And so that totally changes one's brain chemistry and one's consciousness. And so being present with that, looking for those things and finding your heartfelt appreciation for that helps bring in all of the things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for, bringing that piece into the discussion.
Yeah, it was so profound when you said that. And that was actually the first thing I noticed. So to me, that is such an expression of just love and being in the present moment. And I think gratitude also has a vibration that raises us up. It's very hard to be grateful and angry at the same time, or grateful and ashamed at the same time, or any of the negative things that we go through. It's even tough to be grateful and in pain at the same time. And I do speak from experience with my own chronic pain journey. So it is incredibly difficult to be grateful for my cat purring and at the same time feel my pain. It was not possible. So I think when we can raise our vibrations and connect, like you said, to these higher energies, it shifts our brain chemistry, it shifts even our physical body. I feel there were many shifts that happen in those moments. So yeah, what a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so I just wanted to point that out, because that was something that just struck me when you said that. So yeah, and obviously that goes back to us also being multidimensional beings. We're not just a body, a physical thing that is present here on earth. We have many dimensions and layers, and we are physical, we are energetic, we are emotional, we are mental, we are spiritual. And so raising these energies actually connects all of the pieces of ourselves to bring us back to that wholeness you mentioned. So I think this is a vital piece that so often gets missed in the healing journeys. And that's why often we don't make progress with our healing. We're missing all these pieces.
Well, one of the things I'd love to add to the gratitude, discussion that's happening is that I totally agree with what you're saying. And that has made many shifts in my moment from that opening to that gratitude and having things completely shift. And sometimes there's a perfection to the pain that's happening, and then, or perfection to the struggle. And then it will shift for me being grateful for that pain or grateful for that struggle. And it's seeing through the multidimensional lens that also helps support me in that perspective to be able to do that. When I was working with clients one-on-one in my office, and I would see all these soul layers of stories that were happening, I would see the perfection of the struggle that they were having. I would see the perfection of that dynamic. And I would see the choices that were available and what the choice was what was the healing choice, right? I could see what was the healing choice, how to respond in the current situation. And I would see also the percentage of the difficulty of making that choice. So now when I'm working on these larger levels, we're also helping to shift those probabilities to make it easier to choose the healing choice. But in those moments when we're in the challenge of it, in the difficulty in our life, remembering gratitude is another one of those gorgeous entry points. And then that deeper level of trusting that it's a divine setup and that there is a choice, there is an alignment that will continue to help serve the healing. I want to clarify something with that, because it's, in a certain way, the whole design is rigged for enlightenment. The whole design is rigged for awakening. It's sometimes just the speed. So it could be you make the choice, you're in an argument and someone says something and you decide to dive into that same frequency of energy and have a rumble back and forth, and then 5 rumble exchanges back and forth on the inside, you suddenly say, oh, wait a minute, this is not actually what I want to be doing. This is not actually serving. This is not actually what feels aligned with my heart. And then a different frequency comes out of you and you say something different. So it's not that those 5 rumbles are taking you off the track. It's just that the speed of stopping our suffering is where we sometimes have that choice. And so the practice of finding whatever that sweet spot is in yourself to support you coming into that alignment, that is what supports you to come to that faster. So that maybe in a typical argument, as opposed to 5 exchanges, you realize it 4 exchanges and 3 exchanges and 2 exchanges and then 1 exchange. And then at some point you catch yourself before you even go for that first rumble back. So someone might rumble at you, but you've got your clarity and you've got your inner love and trust that everything is perfect. And you speak from a different frequency. You speak from a different voice. You speak from a deeper ground within yourself. So I don't know how we got here in the dialogue, but my words are just stopping this period there.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it goes to, again, the fact that we can, this is innate, really, if we are, like you said, rigged for this. And the difficulty may actually lie in uncovering that again, or remembering it again, and accessing it. And I feel though we can do that, we can practice that, we can take those access points and keep working on them, and eventually we will uncover this beauty and this magnificence of who we are and all these things that we have access to, even though it might take us some time to get there and to find that. But it is there, and it is available and accessible for all of us, for our healing and for our knowledge, for our awakening. And that is part of, so if we rumble back and forth, 5 times and then 4 times, but but we can get there, and we can work on that and can access that. So that to me is part of that beauty, that there's it's everything that we need is already within us, and we just uncover it. So yeah, that is really beautiful. I'm actually glad we went down that track. So yeah. Now, you first worked in a practice, you said, with the shiatsu massage, and now you work with clients as well. So would you like to share a little bit about how our listeners could work with you if they're curious by what we've talked about today, and their curiosities are piqued? How can they work with you? What kinds of programs and services do you offer today for your clients?
Now I'm working with people mostly in groups. So I'm working with people all over the world, and we meet once a month through a live stream. And my vision shifted into being able to not only see one person's soul, but see many people's soul simultaneously. So I'm seeing everyone's soul, their wounding, their lifetimes, their karma, their DNA, their probabilities for this lifetime and future lifetimes, and seeing their enlightened self. And I'm working with a massive team of guides now, and we're working to support each person speed up the healing process of resolving the conditioning, the wounds, the thought patterns, healing the cultural paradigms, and helping people align with the highest probabilities for this lifetime and beyond. So it's an extraordinary experience just to be able to serve in this way. I'm so profoundly grateful. I had worked in my office that I was referencing. I had worked one-on-one with people in the shiatsu massage therapy, and then doing this other kind of healing work. And my practice got so full. I was scheduled out for a year with a 1.5 year long waiting list, and I couldn't serve all the people that my heart was calling me to serve. And so things started to shift to being able to work with more than one person at a time. And then the numbers kept growing, where I then had the capacity to open and hold what I call the soul classroom, where it's an energetic space that's literally is where everyone's souls gather. And there's infinite access to all the information in the universe. And we gather there, and all the guides come, and this incredible light show of healing happens. So that's where I'm working. I still will do private sessions, and we'll start up doing retreats again. I don't have anything on the books, and we'll sometimes do workshops, and I have an advanced class for people who are really deep in this awareness already. So there's multiple ways people can work with me, but the most common one is joining the monthly live stream and the memberships, where you also have access to over 100 hours of recorded healings that still carry the healing transmission that you can listen to over and over and over again, and listen every day, so it can support one's healing process as intensely or as gently as you need it.
Amazing. And we, of course, will be linking to all of Kristin's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there on how you can connect with her, and maybe join her soul classroom if you feel called to do so. That sounds like a really nurturing and supportive and wonderful space to be in. So if you'd like to check that out, have a look at our show notes, and we'll be sure to put all the links there on how you can connect with Kristin. And I just want to take a moment and actually express my own gratitude for you being here today. It has been so wonderful to spend this time with you, and I feel so privileged that we actually got to spend this time together, because I know lives and schedules all around the world are very busy. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day and out of your work to be here today and share this with our listeners. I am so grateful, and my heart is full to have been part of this wonderful conversation. Kristin, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to add that I wanted to give your listeners a free gift of 2 free healing transmissions. And if they go to soulclassroom.com, that they can pop in their email and they can just have those 2 just for free. They're actually they're very specific in that one is helping to clear out a lot of past karma. And then the other one is a light infusion. So in terms of just really specifically for your audience, right, it both helps clear out some of the past conditioning and helps illuminate you on the inside for helping you access all the beauty that we've been talking about in our time together.
Amazing. What a wonderful gift. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'll be sure that we put that in the show notes so that our listeners can access that and try out some of these transmissions for themselves so they can actually listen to it. They can feel that in their bodies and in their subtle being, and they can actually have some of what we talked about in their own experiences. So I very much look forward to them having access to that. And thank you so much for offering that. And again, I truly appreciate your time and your wisdom and all of these experiences that you have shared with us today. We're truly, truly fortunate to have you here. Thank you so much, Kristin.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah. So thank you and take care, Kristin. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejōrni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.